Welcome to Betting the Buckets, presented by BangTheBook.com. I'm Cole Ryan, and I will be your host for this NBA betting podcast. The podcast is delivered in a lightning-quick format. It delivers all the vital information that you need to bet on basketball for Monday, December 8th. So welcome to a great Monday morning, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. I'm sure you might have been wrapped up in some of the great NFL action. If you're a football fan like me, you probably were. Plus, college football ended the season with some great championship games, as well as the college football playoff format, which has reached a fever pitch. So with that in mind, this quick-hitting podcast is actually designed for the NBA betting fan with stuff like that in mind, because it gives you a speedy shot of basketball betting information, get your day started right. I'll get you back on track after being distracted by all that football stuff. This show airs 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so set your schedule for this, what I think is a one-of-a-kind show. The show's only about 5 to 10 minutes, and it'll be loaded with great stats, trends, wagering angles, along with a pick against the spread for some of today's NBA games. So now that we got all the logistics out of the way, let's get things started. A big part of what I like to do with Betting the Buckets is to try to share different wagering angles that the NBA handicapper can look for during the season. I find a lot of these angles by looking back at some of the games that took place during the days prior to my show. So for this game in particular, we're going to dig deep a little bit and go back and look for Saturday's game in a segment I like to call Beyond the Box Scores. The premise is real easy. You just don't glance at the score and try to figure out what happened in the game. You kind of dig a little bit deeper, get into the information, and not only will you find something that might have made the difference in that game, but you're going to find something that might make the difference later when you're betting during the season. So that's what I have going on when I brought up this segment. So again, I'm going to go back to Saturday night. I'm going to look at the game between the Phoenix Suns and the Houston Rockets. The Suns were actually in a very tough spot in this game when they went to Houston, and it actually gives a perfect example of the many situational handicapping angles that you'll find on a nightly basis in the NBA. The Rockets got off to a very hot start in this game. They were shooting 63%. The Suns, on the other hand, shot just 29%. Perfect example of this was Markieff Morris. He had 0 for 7 in the first quarter, and they were down 35-18 by the time the quarter was over. It just shows you how teams can be sluggish out the gate if they're in a tough scheduling spot. Now, the Suns did make it close late in the fourth quarter. They cut it to about 4 points at one time or another, but the only reason it was close is because the Rockets were in cruise control, bench players were getting in, and really the Suns were a victim of the schedule. They didn't really have a chance. They were off a big win against the Dallas Mavericks, which I'll get into that as well a little bit later in this podcast. And they were in a tough back-to-back spot. So win big at Dallas, back-to-back nights play against Houston. And the reason I bring this up is because the NBA season is a grind. It's nearly impossible for players or a coach to get their team up for a game every single night of the season, especially when the schedule isn't doing you any favors. And truth be told, it doesn't get any easier for the Suns. They play the red-hot LA Clippers tonight, and then on Tuesday night, although they'll be back home hosting the Miami Heat, it'll be their 4th game in 5 nights. So that's a very, very difficult spot and one of the toughest schedule spots you'll find all season for any team in the NBA. And they're not alone. Perfect example of this is another game tonight when the Denver Nuggets, they travel to Toronto to take on the Raptors. The Nuggets are not only in a back-to-back travel spot, but they're also playing their 3rd game in 4 nights. This has been a tough spot for the Denver Nuggets. How tough, you say? Well, how about 48 and 124 straight up, and 72, 95, and 5 against the spread. Oof, that's ugly. They're in that space. That's whenever they're in back-to-back nights playing their 3rd game in 4 nights like they are against the Toronto Raptors. Keeping an eye on the schedule and what position a team is in can actually pay off the betting window if you know when to play on or against a certain team. So you got to keep that in mind when you're handicapping basketball. You're looking at all different facets of the game, really. So let's move on with that being said to a quick betting market check for the NBA lines in a segment I like to call Line Check. Game that I want to dissect in the line check segment is a game between the Boston Celtics and the Washington Wizards. This is a unique scenario. It happens a couple times during the season, so keep an eye out for it. But basically, two teams play a home-and-home series. They play one on one home court, and then the next night they play on the other home court. On Sunday, the Celtics hosted the Washington Wizards. The Wizards were 4.5-point favorites on Sunday afternoon against the Celtics. 77% of the public jumped on that number. The Wizards are obviously the superior team, so they thought that would be a good spot. Turns out it wasn't. The Celtics won, and they won big. They were up by 20 points or more at one time in this game. And actually, the Wizards did cut it close late. I think they even brought it to as close as 1 point, but it wasn't enough. Celtics pulled away late. And now they switch venues, right? Both teams had the same travel thing going on, but now they're playing in Washington. So what you're going to see here is a different line. In fact, this line opened up as minus 8.5 points in favor of Washington, and it was actually bet down to about 8 points last time I checked it out. The thing I really want to drive home when I talk about this line check here is every game is different, okay? Now, I know they just played each other, and if you just without thinking about it, just jump on it and go, well, guess what? The Celtics hammered them. Granted, they switched home courts, but what's the big deal? Now I'm getting 8.5 from a team who just won by 9 points or so. That's like a 17.5-point swing. Be careful. Be careful. This is a tough spot. And actually, to me, if I were going to play on this game, to me, this would be a play on the Wizards at home, especially coming off that loss. I could see where the Wizards, with more talent, could easily adjust and win this game big to get a little payback. But that's not my free pick. Let's wrap up the show with a pick and my pick for tonight's schedule. The last pick I had on Friday, easy winners. The Phoenix Suns crushed the Dallas Mavericks. They won outright by double digits as 5.5-point underdogs. Good to finally get in the win column. Love to make a free pick. And tonight I'm going to look at the game featuring the Atlanta Hawks against the Indiana Pacers. Hawks have double-digit wins on the season, but they're just 4-4 on the road. The Pacers are coming home off a 4-game road trip on the West Coast. They lost every single game. But they're at home now. They're going to be around family. They're going to be around friends. They're going to be sleeping in their own bed. I'm telling you, this really makes the difference, especially in the NBA. Hawks 1-4 against the spread in the last 5 meetings and 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games against the NBA Central. The Pacers may not be winning, but they are 5-2 against the spread in their last 7 games overall. This includes a close game in their last outing against the Sacramento Kings. And even though it was the last game of the road trip, it went to overtime. They lost by 1 point, but they're still giving it their all. They're still playing hard. Granted, it's still early in the season, so they should. But that's something to keep in mind. The line I'm catching on this game, I see the Pacers anywhere from -1 favorites to getting a point. For this pick, I'm going to take that point. When the Pacers play as a home underdog coming off a win against the spread, 26-15-1 against the number. I'll take the Pacers as a small underdog in this game. Oh, by the way, if they turn out to be -1 or -2 by the time you can get this bet in, doesn't matter. Still take the Pacers. I think they win convincingly coming back home after the road trip. That will do it for the show. It's that quick. See how quick and simple I try to make it. Get you a bunch of information real quick and get you started on your NBA slate for Monday night. Make sure to follow @BangTheBook on Twitter and stop by bangthebook.com for all of your basketball betting needs this season. Make sure to drop me a line on Twitter. I'm @ColeRyan9. If you want to talk about this podcast, you want to talk about basketball, or really anything in general, I love to hear from people, from fans who either have some info to share or they just want to talk about basketball. Feel free to hit me up. If you do hit me up on Twitter, I'll be sure to give you a mention on the show. And I love talking basketball, so please feel free. Stop by. Have a great night on the court, and make sure to win big betting the bucket.